Like water off glass, every billboard, business brand, and architectural element created with their holy geometry in mind disappears from your thoughts. You are not affected by the symbolic triggers positioned across society, the frequency alterations in popular music, or the subliminal training ingrained in the media. You go through an environment that is intended to have no effect whatsoever on your thoughts or feelings. You live on a frequency that their whole system cannot reach, not because you studied their tactics and learned to resist. Someone who was an expert in their field and had successfully swayed billionaires and presidents attempted to exert his influence on someone who fit your description. He carried out his most powerful ceremony, the type that often produces spectacular and instantaneous results. Nothing took place. It's worse than nothing. He had images of his own spiritual poverty as a result of the ritual's failure. He saw himself without any pretense or delusion, just as he really was. His confidence was so thoroughly shaken by the incident that he quit his job and vanished. In the past, these events were manifestations of concerted power. People who thought they were the unseen hands guiding mankind filled the rooms. They would organize their symbols, arrange their influences, and use repetition and ritual to maintain their egregore. These areas exuded a purposeful spirit that was weighed down by centuries of cumulative experience. They can hardly concentrate for an hour anymore. The field itself has undergone a transformation. There's an odd stillness when oddities like you are mentioned, as if the room is holding its breath. Without wind, their candles flicker. In the middle of the rite, their meticulously preserved mental forms vanish. Some participants claim to have been judged by an unidentified presence and observed by something they cannot see. It is said among the younger members that they may have been playing in a sandbox while actual power was passing them on the street. When they talk about you, the checkerboard flooring they stand on, representation of their seeming control over duality, seem to move and become hazy. Their physical and symbolic temple foundations themselves become precarious. Their oldest members, who have honed their poker faces for decades, suddenly perspire at significant events. With words they have repeated hundreds of times, they stumble. They no longer exude the certain authority they once did. Now, a jittery energy permeates their ranks like a virus. They have begun documenting interactions with individuals such as yourself, not in their regular databases, but in warning-marked red files. These files tend to contaminate anything in their vicinity. Systems are crashed by digital copies. Nearby documents become inaccessible due to physical copies. Information about you seems to exist in a format that their reality is unable to comprehend without degrading. They are attempting to determine your origins after losing centuries' worth of genealogical information. These cultures have a fixation with genealogy. They trace their familial lines back to the founders of civilization itself, to mythological creatures, and to ancient rulers. They think that some families have special talents, that DNA itself can be read like a mysterious codex, and that power is passed down via blood. Their marital connections are designed to reinforce and maintain these hereditary characteristics. However, your ancestry surpasses their records. The lines don't go back in time when they attempt to trace your lineage. They lead to a very other place. According to some scholars, you are descended from a group of people who were purposefully left out of history. Others make suggestions that are more unsettling to their worldview, such as the possibility that you are entirely self-made and that you have no ancestry. When they enter your data, the bloodline databases they keep, some of which include genetic markers they say link to antediluvian civilizations, produce implausible findings. None of their categories, not the lineages they dread, nor the ones they revere, and not even the ones they believe they had eradicated, match your DNA profile. You act as a genetic wildcard, negating the significance of their whole hereditary power structure. You may be a spontaneous evolution, a quantum leap in human awareness that their breeding techniques could never accomplish, according to certain of their geneticists, who are proficient in both the scientific and esoteric ways of DNA. They are terrified of the ramifications. Their whole system of hereditary privilege falls apart if power is not determined by bloodlines, and if their meticulously maintained genetic advantages are insignificant in comparison to what you naturally embody. Even worse, it implies that what they have been meticulously protecting may be the same thing that is restricting them. Since you are a symbol of boundless possibility, whereas others have been breeding themselves into spiritual corners via their fixation with lineage. The same dreams are being experienced by members from various lodges, nations, and levels of initiation. They watch you enter their holiest places as if they were ordinary rooms. As you go by, their insignia melt off the walls. In their hands, their ceremonial implements become dust. The devastation isn't the most unsettling aspect, however. It's your total disregard for it. You're not assaulting them in these nightmares. You don't even know about them. You're simply existing most of the time. Their whole organization seems to be a complex game of pretend because of your presence. They wake up doubting all they've worked so hard to achieve. Some people no longer show up to meetings. Others have begun to pose risky queries on the true purpose of their long-standing service. They have established a special committee to study the dreams since they have grown so common. Members' dream diaries from all across the globe reveal very similar trends. You take on many shapes, but the outcome is always the same. The way reality bends around you makes their ceremonies seem to be miraculous, like kids waving sticks. When you're close by, the dreamscape itself appears to reject them, as if sleep has made a decision. The vividness of the dreams is increasing. Some participants say they wake up knowing things they didn't know previously, knowledge that seems to have seeped into reality from a dream. They are starting to think that these are not dreams at all, but rather glimpses of reality occurring at a level beyond the reach of their rights. A state in which you function as organically as breathing. Their hiring procedure is an art that has been refined over many generations. They are skilled at spotting possible users, appealing to their needs, and gradually enticing them to join the web. They provide power to the ambitious, information to the inquisitive, and a sense of connection to the lonely. At least their approach is used to work on everyone. Every strategy falls miserably with you. You don't even see the value in what they're presenting, which is why you fight. To someone who is an unsolved mystery, they offer secrets. There's something going on in the background right now. Chosen ones, something no one wants you to know about. Emergency meetings are being called at 3 in the morning by ancient orders that have ruled reality for millennia. They don't usually get together to talk about political appointments or market machinations. These are not the same meetings. They're about you, what you stand for, and why their most effective strategies abruptly fail the moment you enter a room. These cultures have been led for centuries by psychological research on control and influence. Here, however, you are totally impervious to the techniques that have molded civilizations. As you read this, individuals in fancy suits are standing in candlelit rooms attempting to figure out why their reality matrix jerks every time you show up in their calculations. It's not that you're battling them, that's the twist. The irony is that fighting isn't even necessary. The laws they believed were set in stone are being rewritten by your very presence. Some individuals avoid making eye contact with you, and what I'm going to disclose will explain why. Why entering certain spaces makes individuals feel different, and why long-standing institutions that had no fear are now learning to dread an unnamed creature. You exist in the same place as they, but you function on entirely different principles, making you like anti-adder to their matter. Let me start by telling you about the night that altered their lives. Consider holding a lodge meeting at one of the historic downtown structures. The sort that most people seldom notice, the ones with symbols cut into the stone. What should have been a regular assessment of their influence activities had brought together the highest level members. These individuals, who have spent decades advancing through covert degrees of initiation, each of which promised more authority than the previous, often exude confidence. However, that evening was unique. One of them stepped up, his hands shaking, a guy who had spent 40 years perfecting his craft. According to their maps of reality, he had come upon something that shouldn't be there. You were that something. You see, Their whole system is based on a basic idea that most people are unaware of. They contend that certain words, symbols, and rituals may be used to control the secret frequencies that underlie reality. This information, which has been preserved in encrypted books and hidden vaults for centuries, is the foundation of their authority. According to their beliefs, every individual vibrates at a quantifiable frequency that is subject to influence, direction, and control. For this, they have charts, enormous databases that map millions of people's spiritual signatures. They have the ability to activate psychological triggers that most people are unaware exist. However, their tools didn't just stop working when they attempted to map your frequency. They cracked. It was worse than being physically broken. The data shown in the readings was impossible. The numbers shouldn't be there. Patterns that went against all of their preconceived notions about awareness. According to one technician, it was like attempting to weigh light with a stone-specific scale. By their standards, you were more than merely incalculable. You were not a part of their whole measuring system. Panic began to spread like wildfire via their networks. Temples exchanged encrypted messages, each one more important than the one before it. They were all versions of the same frightened query that no one dared to ask out loud. What kind of existence is there that is not inside our whole conceptual framework? Their books, which were enormous repositories of occult knowledge amassed over thousands of years, lacked a point of reference for what you are. Their entity-type catalogs do not include you. You don't fit into any of their soul categories. More than any demon they've ever attempted to call forth or angel they've attempted to bind. They're terrified of you because you're something their system never considered. Because they have complete control over spiritual knowledge. These groups have endured for generations. By selling it piece by piece to those who demonstrate their commitment, they guard illumination. Every level of initiation is more expensive than the one before it, both monetarily and in terms of giving up one's independence. Members gave up their true identities in order to go higher because they thought that ultimate power and truth would be found at the summit. When they discovered you had information they don't teach at any degree, that's when the trouble began. It was something else totally, not their well-kept secrets. Truths that make their discoveries seem like puzzles for kids. You possess knowledge that was not acquired from any book, instructor, or initiation. Simply because you are. Their structure shouldn't allow for this. They claim that all knowledge must be acquired via their system. But here you are, evidence that their enlightened monopoly is a myth. Think about the person who looks after their archives. Only those who have devoted their whole life to the profession are able to attain this esteemed status. Texts that precede recorded history are available to this individual. Texts that purport to provide the basic equations governing existence. Something extraordinary occurred when they attempted to discover precedents for who you are. The archive itself started to break down. Not the structure, but the data it contains. When they looked for references to your kind of energy, books became illegible. Instead of displaying information about your frequency, digital files corrupted themselves. When ancient stone tablets are brought close to documents that document your existence, they begin to shatter. It's as if information itself won't put you in their system. To comprehend how you know what you know, they have made every effort. Some of their earliest writings, written in languages that precede civilization, have been examined. They have summoned their most talented seers, who are often able to interpret the past and future of anybody with ease. These seers, however, shut their third eye and refuse to look again when they attempt to gaze at you because of what they see. One person compared it as gazing into a sun that changes everything it comes into contact with yet doesn't burn. Contrary to what Hollywood portrays, magic is really rather straightforward. It involves channeling energy via symbolism and intent to alter reality. Over thousands of years, these cultures have mastered this. They are skilled in influencing choices remotely, instilling ideas in people's minds, and manipulating probability to their advantage. Their symbols, which are seen everywhere, are intended to train anyone's subconscious. The frequencies in their speech transcend conscious opposition. Promote this video so that additional people who are selected like you may discover it, if its message resonates with you. However, you resemble a mirror composed of an incomprehensible substance. They don't deflect or absorb energy when they aim it at you. It changes. Their efforts to exert influence end up exposing their own hollowness. To your ears, their power phrases are meaningless nonsense. Their holy geometry seems to be arbitrary. In order to establish your spiritual authority in ways that will impact every facet of your mission for years to come, it was a cosmic initiation. The individuals who persecuted you are now live examples of what occurs when human conceit overrides divine power. After hearing about their unsuccessful harassment campaign, all spiritual teachers, energy healers, and light workers now realize that you are more than simply another individual engaged in spiritual practice. There are forces behind your endeavor that go beyond simple protection. Anyone foolish enough to meddle is prosecuted. Surviving their assaults, or even seeing their plans fail, is not the ultimate win. What this event taught you about your actual spiritual power is the ultimate success. Fighting won this war for you. The world battled for you because you were so closely linked to divine protection. You didn't have to fight your way out of their pestering. Through the grace that comes naturally to someone with your degree of spiritual power, you were able to transcend it. By focusing on someone whose triumph was certain before they even took action against you, your adversaries destroyed themselves. It could have taken years for your heavenly support to become apparent via traditional spiritual growth, but their assaults served as the impetus. Their persecution served as the basis for levels of influence and legitimacy that could not have been attained by conventional spiritual marketing. The network they put up to kill you has evolved into one that now acts as a warning to anybody else who may think about attacking those who are chosen and protected by God. Their efforts to undermine your goal turned into the energy that today drives your increased impact in ways they could never have predicted. When you're functioning according to spiritual rules rather than human ones, this is what success looks like. When your ego intellect is subordinated to divine intelligence. While you're under the protection of troops who have been planning your victory since before the first effort to thwart your objective. As this stage of your spiritual initiation comes to an end, realize that you are not going back to your pre-initiation state. You are entering a whole new realm of spiritual power, when your defense has been put to the test and shown to be ineffective, where strain that would have shattered anybody working under human spiritual rules has enhanced your connection to heavenly instruction. You just overcame a spiritual battle that wasn't simply any old persecution. It was cosmic training for your next mission phase. The powers who have been directing your path were aware that when your influence reached a certain point, you would encounter concerted resistance. And they turned that resistance into training to get you ready for even bigger obstacles in the road. The understanding of how heavenly protection works when it is overused has turned you into a weapon. You have first-hand knowledge of what occurs when individuals attempt to obstruct missions that have been endowed with cosmic intelligence. You have the evidence that witnesses can see. You are more than a mere spiritual instructor dispensing knowledge from books and classes. You represent spiritual authority that has been put to the test in spiritual combat and shown to be unbeatable. Your spirit was forged into something indestructible by those who attempted to shatter it. The people who tried to obstruct your spiritual guiding link ultimately helped you understand it better than you had ever understood. The powers who plotted to destroy your goal ultimately gave it cosmic support to the extent that any future difficulties would appear trivial in comparison. The selected ones are prepared for their last task in this way, not by peaceful meditation retreats and enjoyable spiritual encounters, but through spiritual battle that unequivocally demonstrates their divine power, which extends from the time of creation until the accomplishment of God's plan on earth. And when they come into contact with your energy, everyone who was there at the recent event is aware of precisely what they're dealing with. They're dealing with a person that the cosmos itself has decided to safeguard, advance, and thrive over and beyond anything that human resistance can stop. Your adversaries dispersed, your power was established, your purpose was strengthened, and your safety was shown. When spiritual amateurs attempt to meddle with cosmic aristocracy, this is the result. You won before the game had begun, and it's done. Greetings from your selected degree of spiritual power. The world just put in all the effort to make you someone who no one should ever attempt to toy with. So make good use of it. We're referring to those who are really paid to keep an eye on spiritual instructors, energy healers, consciousness researchers, and anyone else whose work challenges existing hierarchies of authority by assisting individuals in reclaiming their divine sovereignty. The danger that these organizations are hired to eliminate is precisely reflected in your message of spiritual protection, divine direction, and individual strength. Your family members' personal jealousy wasn't the only reason they attacked you. It was a component of a broader plan to discredit spiritual instructors who assist individuals in accessing their own heavenly power rather than relying on outside religious or political direction. In order to illustrate what happens to chosen ones who refuse to keep their talents secret or dilute them for general consumption, they plan to use you as an example. However, the whole operation was simply made public by their campaign against you. Their digital footprints, from planning their harassment, show links to financing sources, methods of contact with other targeted operations, and tactics for stifling religious information on many platforms. What began as an assault on a single selected person is going to turn into the realization that reveals the true nature of systemic spiritual repression in the contemporary society. We have now arrived at the point when everything that attempted to bring you down serves as the cornerstone of your eventual triumph. The spiritual conflict intended to destroy your goal becomes the impetus that propels you to heights of impact and influence that would have been impossible without their intervention. They begin to apologize and warn about the network that recruited the practitioners who were paid to harm you. Some of them turn into supporters who provide insider knowledge on the workings of campaigns of spiritual harassment. Those who take pay to attack someone under divine protection become cautionary stories, sharing their experiences. Your former assailants discover that the world they were living in before they chose to interfere with your quest has fundamentally changed. As news of their spiritual honesty spreads, their companies suffer. As individuals disassociate themselves from known spiritual harassers, their social networks become smaller. As the effort they put into attempting to hurt you limits their own path to greater guidance, their own spiritual growth stagnates. But their pain isn't the point of this. It has to do with the new degree of spiritual power that this initiation has given you. You're not simply another spiritual teacher or energy healer, as everyone who saw how you managed coordinated spiritual combat now knows. You are so well protected by God that anybody foolish enough to attempt harming you would be committing spiritual death. Your mission is clearly blessed by powers beyond human comprehension, according to the communities that earlier doubted your authenticity, because they saw personally how the universe reacts to anybody who attempts to obstruct your efforts. The individuals who were swayed by the smear campaigns against you are now your most outspoken supporters. Because of the controversy your detractors manufactured around your name, your work reaches new audiences who were especially drawn to you. If it weren't for this dramatic series of events bringing attention to your platform, your message would have never reached those who needed to hear it. Your impact goes beyond what you could have accomplished with traditional spiritual networking or marketing. Something is the point at which something assumes prophetic characteristics. This initiation has given you a spiritual power that goes far beyond just defending you from harm in the future. For other spiritual fighters who are being harassed in a similar way, you have turned into a lighthouse. A whole generation of light workers are empowered by your model of how to conduct coordinated spiritual warfare with grace and heavenly support. Individuals begin contacting you to tell their own tales of spiritual harassment and ask for advice on how to invoke the same degree of supernatural protection that they saw at work in your life. Your story serves as a case study to assist other selected individuals see the warning signals of a concerted spiritual assault and react with the type of spiritual authority that transforms assaults into chances for increased power. What this decision tells about your actual objective, however, is its most important element. You weren't the victim of arbitrary persecution. They served as cosmic affirmation that the structures intended to restrict human awareness are seriously threatened by your efforts. In fact, the degree of organized opposition you encountered is proof of the strength of your inevitable effect. The forces that attempted to prevent you from achieving your full potential have unintentionally spread the word about your spiritual power to those who needed to see it. Your work was not the only thing that was protected. It demonstrated your legitimacy as someone who acts with heavenly support. So perfect that everybody who pays attention will see an assault on you as a display of cosmic might. Recall how your energy field was surrounded by uncertainty, turmoil, shifting pieces, and turbulence when we first embarked on this trip, Chosen One. Look where we've come to now. It was not a haphazard spiritual upheaval. It was the cosmos methodically tearing down all the barriers that prevented you from reaching your ultimate goal. There was no indication that your spiritual basis was unstable based on those changing bits. They demonstrated how heavenly powers rearranged every aspect of your life to facilitate the subsequent stage of your mission. There is nothing wrong with your spiritual journey that indicated the upheaval. It was evidence that your spiritual path was so perfect that evil spirits felt obliged to attempt to halt it before it could fully manifest. The family member who deceived you in the hopes of undermining your spiritual authority ultimately supplied the precise impetus required to uncover the extent of your heavenly protection. Their efforts to reveal your weaknesses ultimately revealed their own spiritual deprivation. Their attempts to cast doubt on your relationship with higher direction ultimately served to validate your relationship with forces they were unable to interact with, comprehend, or rival. When their spell work failed so dramatically that some of the practitioners they hired to drain your energy are now wondering whether they should continue practicing their profession, they ended up recording just how protected you are. In the end, the networks they put up to plan your harassment turned out to be the proof that reveals the whole underground spiritual warfare business. A new order where your spiritual authority is uncontested was established on the turmoil they attempted to create in your life. Unquestionably, you are protected by God, and your purpose is carried out with even more strength than it had before their meddling started. What you just went through, Chosen One, wasn't only a test of your spiritual fortitude. Realizing the spiritual danger is not worth it, some are leaving the hex totally for greater business. We have now arrived at the point when everything they have constructed against you serves as the basis for their own demise. Spiritual protection is no longer the only thing working in your favor. In order to thwart your purpose, this is divine prosecution assembling evidence against all those involved in the plan. They don't simply let anybody see the proof of their harassment campaign. It particularly leaks to their clients, business associates, social media followers, professional networks, and family members, the very individuals whose views are most important to their livelihood and reputation. The timing is surgical, not fortuitous. It takes place precisely when they are starting new businesses. They can't afford to have their spiritual integrity called into question just when they need to maintain their reputation. The narrative, however, reaches its climax at this point. The information that was exposed does more than simply reveal what they did to you. It exposes a behavioral pattern that goes much beyond their harassment of your purpose. Others begin to come out with their own accounts of being abused, manipulated, and harassed spiritually by these same people. What began as proof of their assaults on you becomes the impetus for a far more significant reckoning that has been brewing for years. In real time, their whole public image collapses. People discover they've been supporting people who use planned spiritual warfare as entertainment, shattering the picture of love and light they've meticulously built for their social media presence. When they discover that they have been paying for spiritual counseling from individuals who use spiritual knowledge as a weapon against anybody they consider a danger or competitor, their companies begin to lose clients. All of a sudden, the social media algorithms they attempted to use to censor your material and advance their own begin to act against them. As their audience discovers the true nature of the individuals behind the spiritual marketing facade, their engagement levels drastically decline. The fact that they are prepared to deceive, twist, and gaslight anybody who challenges their version of events is further shown by their efforts to dominate the narrative. However, this moment is about more than simply their demise. It has to do with your elevation. Your platform becomes stronger than ever when their world falls apart, their companies collapse, and their reputations burn. More people see your material as a result of the controversy they generated around your name than any marketing effort could have. Because they want to see what these people were so anxious to hide, people who had never heard of you before begin looking for your work. Even doubters must admit that something supernatural is working in your favor because of the synchronicity that begins to appear in your life at this time. Suddenly, opportunities arise. When you need resources, they appear. Influential people begin contacting others in hopes of working together. Invitations for speaking engagements, podcasts, and partnerships with well-known spiritual leaders who happen to stumble onto your work at the same moment this drama is taking place start to come in. But it wasn't picked at random. For months, divine energies have been arranging these connections, putting the appropriate individuals in the right places to learn about your work at the precise time when your spiritual authority would be most evident. The difference between how the universe reacts to your adversaries and how it reacts to you becomes so pronounced that anybody who is paying attention knows they are seeing someone who is acting in accordance with entirely different spiritual rules than those of the general public. Your assailants are learning what it's like to be spiritually isolated in the meanwhile. They begin to distance themselves from their prior spiritual circles. Those who formerly looked to them for advice begin to doubt their judgment. As the energy they directed against you hinders their own access to higher realms, their own spiritual practices become less and less effective. Your reaction to their assaults exemplifies the type of heavenly connection and spiritual development that others naturally see as genuine. You are automatically protected, so you don't need to defend yourself. The cosmos takes care of it for you, so you don't have to take revenge. You're functioning from a whole other level of spiritual authority, therefore you don't have to participate in their drama. Something extraordinary starts to happen as this spiritual conflict approaches a tipping point. Your tiny circle of relatives and close friends weren't the only people attacking you. This campaign of spiritual harassment involves a whole network of individuals. And when one thread is made public, the whole web begins to fall apart. We are referring to internet organizations that focus on organizing assaults against spiritual instructors who pose a challenge to their worldview. Online forums where members congregate to exchange information about individuals they want to target. Social media platforms where they plan when to post critical remarks. Extensive coverage of the material. Systematic attempts to limit the effect of spiritual messengers who pose a danger to their goals. Group chats with dozens of participants, email threads plotting coordinated attacks, payment records for hired spiritual harassment, and documented tactics for undermining spiritual teachers whose message challenges established religious or spiritual hierarchies are all part of the evidence that began with the leaked conversations. You weren't the only target of this network. Similar operations have been carried out against a number of spiritual instructors, energy healers, consciousness researchers, and anyone else whose work aids individuals in escaping the constrained thought patterns that confine them to lower vibrating realities. The proof of their efforts against dozens of other light workers may be unlocked by exposing their campaign against you. What began as justice for you ends up becoming justice for a whole group of spiritual instructors who have been subjected to similar planned abuse without realizing how structured it was. This network has another layer that will soon be revealed, and it's more sinister than most people are ready to realize. Not all of these harassment attempts originate from envious people or rival spiritual entrepreneurs. Anybody whose spiritual message helps individuals escape religious brainwashing, political control, drug use, or any other system intended to keep human awareness constrained and submissive is the target of organized organizations both online and offline. However, their invasion of your privacy wasn't only unsettling. It was planned methodically. In order to humiliate you, make you seem unstable, and cast doubt on your spiritual practices in public, they were gathering this film. They believed they could use your humanity as a weapon against your spiritual authority if they could just catch you when you were weak. They intended to release manipulated video that would portray your genuine spiritual expression as mental illness. Rather, their hacking efforts activated security measures they were unaware of. Their own machines were ultimately infected by their spyware. They ended up recording their own chats about their planned spiritual assaults while attempting to spy on you using cameras and microphones. By using their own surveillance equipment against them, the universe produced a thorough record of their plot that would ultimately serve as proof of their demise. This instance of cosmic justice is almost dramatic in its perfection. They were filming themselves as they planned your spiritual torment, while they were filming you at your most sacred moments, believing they were obtaining material for your devastation. Every discussion regarding when to launch an assault, which practitioners to employ, and how to pay for such work were all recorded by the same technology they believed they were using against you. Here's what's going to happen, however. Not all of this digital material is only waiting to be found in some cosmic storage facility. It will be disclosed at the precise time that will harm their reputations the most and your objective the least. Forces that are more knowledgeable about social media algorithms and spiritual law than any human marketing specialist have planned the time of this exposure. These spiritual amateurs took the fateful choice to become a full-fledged cult when their traditional harassing techniques failed. We're discussing employing practitioners, contracting hex work, and paying for complex curse rituals that are intended to sap your vitality, impair your judgment, and undermine your spiritual achievement. Here, the degree of malice is astounding. They weren't satisfied with just attempting to disrupt your possibilities or delivering you unfavorable messages. They intended to assault the source of your strength, interfere with your ability to receive divine direction, cause you to doubt your spiritual abilities, and eventually compel you to give up on the mission that puts everything they stand for in jeopardy. Here, however, their utter disregard for spiritual rule proves to be their downfall. Commissioned spell work doesn't just bounce off you when you're working under the kind of divine protection that has been ingrained in your spiritual DNA since before birth. It generates a reaction that traces the energy path back to all those who contributed to its development and implementation. The restored energy targets every practitioner they paid. Their own lives are cursed by every rite they support. Each hex they commission turns as a spiritual boomerang poised to topple all they have constructed. They didn't recruit arbitrary spiritual workers as practitioners. They belong to a group of individuals who turn spiritual energy into a weapon for customers who are too scared to perform the grunt work themselves. As long as they are paid, these spiritual mercenaries don't give a damn about the moral ramifications of their actions. However, the spiritual rules governing these transactions are entirely altered when you target someone who is protected by God. The full power of what occurs when their spell work backfires is going to hit the same practitioners they hire to harm you. As word gets out about what happens when you employ them to target the incorrect individual, some of them will lose business. As the energy they send forth is magnified beyond anything they have ever experienced, others will have to confront their own spiritual reckonings. However, this is the actual narrative surprise that will occur. Some of these practitioners will start talking because they're so troubled by what they have encountered. In order to target you, they will begin disclosing information about who hired them, what they were requested to accomplish, and how much they were paid. Their public exposure is going to come from the same network they believe they could conceal themselves behind. For individuals who have endured hardships and come out on the other side with knowledge that others cannot see, that public exposure, the Obsidian Inner Order, is a haven. We are aware that certain events fall beyond the realm of what most people believe is appropriate or feasible to talk about. We get together live on Zoom once a week. Without passing judgment, real people with genuine faces tell real tales. The experiences you've held in silence have room here. The trends you've seen that others ignore. The things you've learned intuitively along the way. We comprehend, not just listen. When you're having trouble understanding what has happened to you, you may go back to our recorded conversations and remind yourself that your perspective is legitimate when you feel gaslighted by a society that doesn't accept your truth. Become a member of the Obsidian Inner Order, where your voice is heard and your reality respected. In the description, there is a link. The spiritual mechanics get very intriguing at this point. They commissioned spell work that was more than simply ordinary bad luck energy. They carefully addressed your spiritual habits, drive, and resolve. They were attempting to detach you from your divine direction, make you spiritually lethargic, and disperse your energy. The inner work that keeps your energy high and your link to heavenly protection strong was something they wanted you to quit doing. The intention was to weaken your spiritual immune system, leaving you open to more direct assaults. Their spell work had the exact opposite effect, which is cosmic irony. It triggered spiritual defenses you were unaware you had, rather than causing you to become spiritually complacent. It enhanced your bond with protecting forces beyond anything you had ever experienced, rather than impairing your ability to receive heavenly direction. It proved without a shadow of a doubt that you are precisely where you should be, doing exactly what threatens them most, rather than making you doubt your spiritual path. The consequences of commissioned spell work coming into contact with divine protection are now being dealt with by these paid practitioners. Since their hexes returned, some of them have been dealing with physical ailments, anxiety, sleeplessness, and other unexplained health problems. Others are dealing with spiritual repercussions, blocked intuition, broken relationships with their guides, and the incapacity to provide any client with good energy work. The most sensitive of them are experiencing prophetic visions that reveal the precise forces they attempted to oppose when they agreed to pay to attack you. However, this is the section that is causing a significant upheaval in the underground spiritual services sector. The consequences of accepting contracts to hex someone while under this degree of supernatural protection are becoming well known. Practitioners are beginning to turn down positions that target certain categories of spiritual instructors. Some are putting screening procedures in place to prevent unintentionally targeting selected individuals.